Now, I want to move to what does it mean?
Okay.
That's another whole bag.
Yes.
When we stop to think about that.
Yes.
How do I determine, having seen what it says, in the time I have to do it? And by the way, this kind of study may take you several days. If you've got 30 minutes a day, it may take you several 30-minute segments to do a quality job of observation.
Yes.
Now, we're now answering, what does it mean?
We usually talk about that with the word interpretation.
Yes.
Trying to understand the meaning of the text. We've seen what, and it's a little bit of the why. Why is Paul writing this? Why is Matthew saying this about Jesus, or whatever the circumstances?
Right.
And so what we want to be careful is, as we follow the writer, Paul, Matthew, whoever it might be,
right,
we're starting to follow their meaning, their intention. And that's going to help us with interpretation, which is, what is the meaning that Paul is trying to communicate in light of what he's saying?
Yeah. Now, you've done it, but I want to say it. You ask questions.
Yes.
Why did he say this? Actually, observation is what? What does it say?
Yeah.
Interpretation is, why does he say it like that?
Yeah.
God so loved the world that he gave his... Wait. Stop and think about that. He loves the world. Not just my country, not just my race, not just people who were raised, as most of us in this church may have been raised, but the world.
Yeah.
All the different cultures, all the different settings, even those that aren't very lovely, are loving or responsive. When you really let the world be the world, it does something to you.
Yeah.
I remember writing, when I was doing some research in John 3, circling several times, world.
Yeah.
World. And I drew out from that circle cultures, races, languages, geography, islands of the sea, for example,
Yeah.
and little landlocked areas, and urban world, and rural world, and uneducated world, and highly educated, all of it. You're interpreting a word as you're going through. Now people can see why it takes time.
Yeah, and I think even as we said, reading through John 3:16, reading through the book of John, we see John will use that word world multiple times.
Yeah, he will.
And so some are going to hear you and they'll say, how did he know that?
Yeah.
But partly that's because some of John 3:16 is being explained before John 3:16, where John will use world.
Yes.
And some of it's going to be explained in later chapters.
Yeah.
In the Gospel of John,
Yeah.
where he'll use world again. And all of a sudden, when we circle the word world in John 3:16, and where
Right.
it's used earlier and where it's used later and how it's used,
Exactly.
we're finding meaning.
Yeah, and you know another great question? To whom did Jesus, because Jesus said those words.
Yes.
Who's he talking to?
Yes.
And you find it's an interview. It's a dialogue between him and, as I heard a guy call him the other day, Nicodemus. Nicodemus is the way we normally pronounce his name. Jesus and Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee.
Yeah.
Who came at night.
Yes. Yes. A late night meeting.
Late night meeting, not wanting other Pharisees to know he was there because Pharisees were on Jesus' case. All of that plays into and it moves into the whole idea, or moves out of the idea of you must be born again. As a part of this world, John 3 presents the gospel so clearly that just being born from your mother's womb, because Nicodemus, as bright as he was, says, hey, I've already been born. Do I need to be born again from my mother's womb? It's impossible. No. There has to be a spiritual birth, and your interpretation will help bring that out.
Yeah.
Now, we're not saying this to complicate anything. We're helping people realize the depth. You can't read an average book like that.
Right.
It's a waste.
Right.
It's not that meaningful. Whereas, as one of my profs used to say at seminary, we have an infinite text.
Yeah.
Meaning it's unfathomable. It's a bottomless well of information and truth.
Again, with looking at Nicodemus being a Pharisee, we could go to Matthew
Yes.
and Mark
Yes.
and Luke and
I know where you're going.
and just study Pharisees.
Yeah, look at that group.
Yeah, and learn.
But
more and
Nicodemus
more.
didn't fall in the category of those who were so cynical.
Right.
Maybe he started that way.
Right.
Why he changed, we're not told, but that he changed. Here's a surprise, and this will bring us to the next step, and that's called correlation. When you get to the end of the Gospels, guess who helps prepare him for the burial? Nicodemus,
Yeah,
who has become by now a believer.
a follower.
What's fascinating about it, I get so excited when I think about it, you start with just a simple interview where he comes at night and he's talking to Jesus and asking these questions. And Jesus very calmly and graciously says, no, you're not going to be born from, you must be born from above. You don't know when that happens, but you know somewhere between chapter 3 and at the end, chapter 21, very much toward the end of John's writings, Nicodemus has turned his life over to Christ. Now he's in the dilemma of being among the Pharisees, but not really one with them.
Right. He's a believer now.
Exactly. And talk about application. See, when I see that and I correlate that, beginning with the end, and other parts that we may read about Nicodemus, I realize I'm speaking to people who are like Nicodemus. They're running with a crowd that's not good for them. They haven't trusted in Christ. He's kind of a figure that everybody talks about, nobody really knows much about, he thinks. And then he discovers that he's knowable, he's believable, he's the one who does these miracles and is loaded with compassion and is training 12 disciples, one of whom goes bad. And it's a very realistic story, and all the while, God is working in the life of Nicodemus. And those who are listening to this Bible study that I'm involved in are ready to say, some of them, that's me. That's where I am. I'm somewhere between chapter 3 and chapter 21. I don't know how to get. So we have the joy of telling them about Romans, 3, 4, and 5, where we give the gospel and explain to them that Christ died for our sins and rose from the dead. And by believing in him, I can have a peace that's like no other peace in life.